Hello and welcome back to the Stacey West YouTube channel, and welcome back to another monthly show. Today we are going to be reviewing the whole of October and moving on to previewing the whole of November. Lots of games to talk about. Obviously quite a busy month in terms of news as well. So to go all through it, I am joined by Mr. Tactical Genius himself, Chris Lowing. How are we doing?
I don't know how I feel about the genius bit. I don't think
to do it now.
You can't set a level I can't exceed, mate. You can't give me a level I can't live up to. But hello, I'm very well. Apart from I've got a cold. Recorded the podcast with Gary last night, felt absolutely fine. Woke up stinking cold. I reckon it's because I lost at Burridge.
That does really take it out of you, actually. It puts a real low feeling in you. Speaking of Burridge and the podcast last night, we are also joined by Mr. Well, he's Gary. Hello, Gas. How are we doing?
I wondered how you were going to introduce me there. I did wonder. Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's nice to be back on your show.
It's good to have you back. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick straight off, because we've got a lot to talk about, and have a look at this month's results. And welcome back. And here are the results from October. So there was obviously one cup game in there with Wolves under 21s. And then a little bit, something kind of happened after Burton. I don't know whether people know necessarily about what happened. But obviously there was a slight managerial change in there. But overall, 7 is the key number from this month. We had 7 games, scored 7 goals, conceded 7 goals, and got 7 points. Gary, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts overall on the month that has been?
Well, it's a pivotal month in the history of the club, obviously, whenever you have a managerial change. But if you take that away and look at the results, it's pretty much a mixed bag. Probably not a terrible mix of results. There's maybe one defeat too many in there, the Burton game. I think we all probably expected Peterborough and Oxford to be challenging games. I think a victory against Charlton was really good as well. So, but look, it's really contrasting, because the 3 results at the beginning of the month and the 4 after don't tell the full story. So, it comes together to form this really average month. 7 is the lucky number. But in real terms, the 2-0 defeat at Peterborough, boy, it seems like a lifetime ago now. There seems to be an awful lot of water having passed under the bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a lot of that. It's a real mixed bag, as you already said. Some really good performances in there. I think we can all probably agree that one of, if not the best game of the month, was that Charlton home game, a 3-1 victory, a commanding attacking performance. And we really were able to shut them down as well. And then obviously some really poor performances. I mean, Chris, you obviously went out on Twitter and on the podcast and spoke about some of our disappointing attacking metrics, shall we say, after Burton. And obviously you influenced the club enough to get Mark Kennedy sacked. So do you, just watching the games, have you really noticed much of a difference in performances in the second half of the month?
Yes, I have, to be honest. And I think that wouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I imagine anyone that's watched those games has seen a little bit of a difference in there. Our overall formation and shape is pretty similar, but I think our intent on the ball has definitely changed. Of course, as mentioned, the highlight of that and the epitome of that this month was the Charlton game, which I think was obviously outstanding, but it was also, I think, energy sapping in a game which we've had a lot of, in a month, that we've had a lot of games. So from that point, well, I'm sure we'll touch on tactics and statistics later, but there has been a definite kind of shift in possession. But also it's apart from the Charlton game, it hasn't really been sustained over the full 90 minutes really in any of those fixtures so far. So I think it's very early days in Tom Shaw's current interim reign. Of course, we don't know how long he's going to be in that role for. But you can definitely see what he's trying to do. And I like that. I like the direction we're going in that regard. There's definitely some things that we can iron out and things that we can improve. I think that was absolutely proven against not only Oxford, but actually Exeter a little bit as well. But on the whole, there's some positive changes. I think in those attacking metrics have started to shift a little bit. Some of those numbers are kind of exaggerated a little bit by the extreme nature of the stats from the Charlton game, but there has definitely been a notable change in our method, I suppose, on the ball, and it's worked sometimes, but it hasn't worked at others. But that's to be expected after just 4 games, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing there is the fact that realistically, for only one of the matches have we seen it for a full 90 minutes, and that was Charlton. I think the Fleetwood and the Exeter ones, they're two that are kind of symbolic of the whole season, not just the 4 games under Tom Shaw, but the whole season, in the fact that we were able to perform well from the off. In both of the games, we got a goal within the first half, and then unfortunately we invited a little bit too much pressure on ourselves in the second, and we did that for both of the games. Against Fleetwood, we were able to hold on through some really good defending from ourselves, but also through a lack of ability in the attack from Fleetwood that day. But against Exeter, we just didn't manage to hold on. So for me, I found them really similar games, even though the results are somewhat contrasting.
Can I just add, by the way, when you look at those 3 defeats, actually, Peterborough, we should have been leading at half time, and then arguably the second half's different. Burton, we scored their goal. Otherwise, that had draw written over it all day long. And both the goals against Oxford were our own errors as well. So even though we're looking here at a really patchy month, and we're looking at a Lincoln City team that are not playing for 90 minutes, that are not firing on all cylinders, there isn't a game there that you can actually sit down and go, wow, the opposition created easily enough chances to beat us and we were never in it. The ones where opposition have created chances, like Peterborough, we were in it. The Oxford game, everyone's saying how we were outplayed by a much better team, but actually their XG was only 1.39. They weren't outstanding in front of goal. We were very, very resolute at the back. Exeter 10 minutes from taking a win from that as well. So there's promising signs, and that actually goes back to Mark Kennedy. Still, I've been critical of Kennedy, but if you go back to the latter days of Mark Kennedy's reign, there was enough there to actually suggest that we were moving forward. Nobody thought Mark Kennedy would be sacked based on performances or based on results. And I still think that shows over this last month of October.
Oh, and I definitely agree. I think tactically, in the way we're setting up and our ability in defence as a whole is still really, really strong. But it's the fact that individual errors are just creeping in that little bit too much at the minute, and it's becoming a regular occurrence. I mean, we spoke about it in the September monthly show, and the fact that a couple of set piece goals were being conceded, and just little individual errors were happening far too often, to the point where it then kind of marred what could have been a really, really solid month again and kept us within the sort of top 10 of the table. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and we'd started slipping back down to the point where obviously we were losing games that we probably should have still been in some sense. But talking of individual errors, what will be really interesting to see is how much our best 11s have changed as of this month. Okay, so here is Gaz's best 11. Gary, why don't you talk us through why you've picked these particular players?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that this, I clarified before we went on air that this is an 11 to take into the next month. So this is a best 11 to play going forward, not the best 11 from October's performances. I just want to obviously clarify that. So I think there's some positions that obviously pick themselves. I think Jensen does, O'Connor does, Sorensen, he's always got to be on the pitch. So looking at the back 5 there, I just think that those 3 centre backs are capable of dealing with multiple different types of attacks. So they're capable of dealing with a target man. They're capable of dealing with a big man, little man. I think aside from Tuesday night against Oxford, where O'Connor certainly didn't have his best game, I think they complement each other really nicely. Now, I know there's a shout for Sean Rowan to be in there. My question to Chris when his comes up, if he's picked Rowan, who knows, is how do you realistically drop an Alex Mitchell who got 3 man of the match performances from Stacey West readers and who has actually barely put a foot wrong? Bear in mind, he commits 0.08 fouls per game. So he's a central defender that will put a tackle in, that will put a head in, that will put a block in, and very, very rarely fouls. And I think that that's actually quite important. He doesn't give silly free kicks away. So for me, I obviously we've got them there with Mitchell in the middle, Jackson left, O'Connor right, whatever kind of, however you want to mix them up and put them in there, you can do. But I haven't at the moment seen a significant benefit from having a natural left footer at the left-sided centre-back. And I think Sean Rowan has had a few mistakes recently. He obviously took a knock on Tuesday night. And I just think going into November, it's perhaps time just to rest him a little bit. Reason I've not put him at left-back is Jack Burrows is more of a natural left-back. I like Burrows. I think he's quick. I think that his parents must have sponsored the game for him to get man of the match on Tuesday night, because he was, he wasn't one of the top 3 or 4 players on the pitch. But he's got nice pace. And when we talk about how we attack at the moment, and Chris, I'm sure, is going to touch on this, those 2 wide players that we've got further forward, they're not wingers, they tuck in. And that means that the threat has got to be on the overlap. So if we're looking at the overlap, who's a better overlap in attacking wing back, Sean Rowan or Jack Burrows? It's Jack Burrows. So that's why he's picked. I know, again, some people like Lass further forward. I think he's done really well further forward. But actually, I think his attacking threat can be just as much from right wing back as it can be from right wing. I know he got those 11 shots in against Charlton, but I still think that that's his best position. That's where we play him. The middle 2 pick themselves. If anybody's got any argument, I'll fight you. But that's the middle 2. That's the pairing in the centre of midfield. That's fact. Then up top, again, I know Danny Mandroy is the villain of the piece, isn't he? He's the Marvel villain. He's the one everybody loves to kind of say he's got an attitude problem. He's got this, he's got that. He's also got immense talent. And when you're playing 2 players that are just tucked in slightly, I think he's a brilliant player to have there. If he gets that thing going with Burrows and he gets something going with Jack Vale and he gets himself back into the pace of the game, Danny Mandroy is our best player in terms of technical ability. Zero doubt. He's got to play. Anybody that says that Danny Mandroy isn't playing is picking a team based on what they think is his attitude. Nobody knows what his attitude is except those working for the club. We don't know what his attitude is based on the comments from one manager and the fact that sometimes he slinks around the place sulking on the pitch. He's a great footballer. Jack Vale's a centre forward. You pick a centre forward if you've got one, no questions asked. It's as simple as that. He's looked good. We haven't seen enough of him to say that he's going to be a better centre forward than Tyler Walker or Ben House. But if you've got a centre forward, you pick one. And, I just think it gives you more balance. And then I've picked Hacks. And what a bizarre situation to be in from the beginning of the season, because the last time I did this was August, just the beginning of August, and Hacks wasn't even in the conversation. He didn't have a squad number. The reason I've gone for Hacks over a Bishop, over a Smith, over any of those, genuinely, he's actually the set pieces. It's the throw-ins and the corners. I think he is a decent enough footballer to warrant that place. I think you could make an argument for a fixture depot to play there. You could make an argument for Ted Bishop. You could make an argument for Ali Smith. All of them are square pegs in round holes, every single one of them. But this is a square peg in a round hole that comes with a little flag on the top that says, I can throw the ball a hell of a long way. And that really, really is dangerous. And we're beginning to make the most of it. So that's why Hakeem Adelican would get in my starting 11 this month.
Okay, interesting. So we've sort of alluded to it there. There are so many different options that can be picked. And for the first time, we have got 3 totally different best 11s. So let's move straight on to Chris's. And Chris, you talk us through ours and then yours, and then tell us why Gary was wrong in any of the ones that you've picked differently to him.
I don't think Gary's wrong as such. I would never dare say such a thing. Obviously, there's a lot of similarities here between me and Gaz, and I think before I explain the big difference in my decision for that, it's just to kind of add to a couple of points that he made. Lass Sorensen's been excellent in that more advanced role in a couple of games this season, but I still feel his long-term position is at wing back. Definitely, he has got all the attributes to be an outstanding wing back at this level, and we've seen it already this season, regardless of his frankly ridiculously good performance against Charlton. He's a wing back for me, and that's his best position. That's where he can be the biggest threat, particularly under Tom Shaw, where those wide attackers are tucking in even more so than they were under Mark Kennedy, which means there's even kind of bigger reliance on those wing backs for the overlap. And Lass is built for that, really. And I agree with the selection of Burrows for the same reason over Rowan at wing back. Again, despite the fact that Rowan has played a couple of games at wing back under Tom Shaw and has impressed. I'll be honest, he has impressed again, particularly against Charlton, but in some other games as well. He's found himself much more advanced up the pitch than he has done kind of previously in that role. But I just like a left-footed centre half, particularly now when Tom Shaw is quite clearly making the point of we do want to try and play from the back, have more ball possession and try to have more control of the game in possession of the ball. And quite simply, just passing lanes when you're playing out from the back with having a natural left footer in that left centre half role, for me, it's almost essential if that's your style. I don't think it's a surprise that we saw Paudie O'Connor struggle in possession on Tuesday against Oxford, because Oxford are the best out of possession team that we've come up against this season, in my opinion. I thought they were fantastic. They shut off so many of our forward passes, which left Paudie with decisions to make on the ball. He either swings his left peg at it and gets the ball forward, or he tried to find a pass like cutting back inside. And then there was a couple of misplaced passes just because of that little bit of kind of indecision, I suppose. And that's not Paudie's fault by any means. And I have to admit, on Tuesday, what I was super impressed with was his recovery. You know, even when he did make a couple of mistakes, he was the one that won the ball back, you know, a few seconds later. But I just think you square pegs, square holes, really. And for me, Sean Rowan hasn't actually played left centre half under Tom Shaw yet, and I think he really suits us there. The question, of course, then is who misses out. And for me, it was between Mitchell and Jackson, and both of them deserve to play. There's no denying both of them deserve to play. I went for Jacko just for his experience, to be honest. The fact that he's played more games in a row and consistently than maybe we thought he could do. So for me, he's maybe a little bit more robust than maybe we realised. We thought he was just a one match a week player, really, didn't we? Whereas he's clearly able to play multiple games. But for me, it's definitely O'Connor and then Jackson or Mitchell, to be honest. And you can flip a coin for me. Those statistics about Mitchell were really interesting. To be honest, if I'd known them or if I'd done a little bit more research beforehand, I might have maybe chosen Alex Mitchell there. But I'll be honest, it's a little bit of recency bias, because I would love to see what his passing accuracy was on Tuesday night. And probably his passing accuracy felt like it would have been pretty low on Tuesday. He's been brilliant for us. There's no denying that. But I think there was a little bit of recency bias in my mind when I picked Jackson for that. But the big thing for me really was having that natural left-sided centre half. And bar a couple of individual errors that Rowan has made, he has been solid for the majority of this season. And that is his best position. That is his long-term position. So that's why I've chosen him there. The rest of it is pretty self-explanatory, as Gary says. Ethan's in the middle. That just is factually correct. Like that's objectively the right decision. There's no question over that whatsoever. Manjoyu, I agree 100% as well. And particularly if we wanted him to tuck into those central areas and have a bit of a free role and rotate, I think he suits that role brilliantly. And to be honest, as does Hacks, for the reasons that Gaz has mentioned. But I think I'm actually going to big Hacks up more than Gaz did, which again feels a bit strange because even last month, and he'd been doing quite well, I still didn't include him in my best 11. I don't think, and I think it's a kind of a confidence thing for Hacks as well now, because he's demanding the ball. Not only is he finding space, he really wants the ball. It's not like he waits for the ball to come to him; he demands it, and that's a sign of a confident player, a player on form. And there's no obvious other player that can fit in there. I've been super impressed with Ali Smith. I'd like to see Ali Smith get a run in the team. I don't know where he plays, to be honest, if we keep this shape. So yeah, Hacks, for me, gets the nod. Manjory for the reasons mentioned, and Jack Vale, of course. Been pretty impressed with cameo so far. Was a little quiet against Oxford, but again, we couldn't really find any service to him. But he's a fit centre forward, and in the little snippets that we've seen so far, he's impressed me, really. So yeah, that's mine and the reasoning behind it.
Am I right to chime in, Charlie?
I knew what you were about to get up because I saw your eyes light up as soon as Chris mentioned it.
First of all, I'm just going to make one, and it's an incredibly pedantic. It's not even a proper point, but to say putting a left centre back in is square pegs in square holes, and then name a right footer at left back.
Jack Burrows is two-footed. So
well, it says preferred foot right on my on Y Scout, so I'm taking that.
No, I'm sorry, I'm going to completely disagree with you here, because
if you actually watch the games more closely, Gary, you'd know.
Yeah, Gaz.
Do you know what? I am absolutely
I'm going to say I really can't say that, can I?
And also the passing stats. Yeah, so obviously Chris said you would like to see the passing stats. Alex Mitchell, 71% passing accuracy on.
Definitely was recency bias because he did 3 in a row, but it stuck in my mind.
Adam Jackson, 89%.
Oh.
Paudie O'Connor, 69%. So actually,
So
Mitchell
I
was
suppose
slightly better.
but I was always going to pick O'Connor. So of Jackson and Mitchell,
Yeah, of course.
then
And
that backs my decision up. Then thank you.
and Y Scout also says that Jack Burrows is right-footed. So maybe if you did research before coming on.
Well, all I've gone from is what we've seen on the pitch, and every interview that's ever been done mentioning Jack Burrows' two-footedness, particularly the evening that Charlie and I had with Jez George when Jez mentioned how amazed he was at how genuinely two-footed he was. So there.
Yeah, we'll just name drop just to prove a point. I like you thinking that, Chris.
It's we now, is it, Charlie? It's we now, is it? Like he always has
I'm
to.
on Chris's side. I'm on Chris's side
go on
because he
then.
won. Yeah. Right. So we're gonna go on to my one, and I've probably got the most different. Now if you look at my most recent downloads on my computer, dangerous thing I know, but the amount of different best 11s that I have made today, it's crazy. But I've actually settled on this, which, as I said, is the most different. Jensen in goal, again, I think we can agree he picks himself, as do the two Ethans in the middle. I think we've already agreed that the Mandroyu is definitely in the squad as well, and Sorensen is definitely on the pitch. But I have moved Sorensen up to right wing. I have got a back three of O'Connor, Jackson and Mitchell. Burrows right wing back, Sean Rowan left wing back, because I like a right-footed right wing back and a left wing back.
You said that before I was going to, and you know it.
Yeah, I had to beat you to it because I knew exactly where you were going with it. Sorensen, obviously, as I said, on the right wing, Mandroy on the left, and I've gone for Hakeem up top. Now, I'm going to start off with the players that I have dropped. Now, obviously, I've not got Jack Vale in there. Jack Vale, I think, has been absolutely brilliant since coming in, and I'm definitely not denying that. And I think he is the sort of most striker-like player that we've got in the team at the minute. But I actually think that Hakeem Adelican has grown into that striker role really, really well. And I'd be kind of worried about moving him into one of those other positions and dropping him out of the striker position, because I feel like all of this good form that he's currently in and the way he's been playing, I don't want us to lose that if we were to move him into another position. And I just kind of worry that is going to be the case. I feel he suits that position in the way that we're currently playing really well. I was on the podcast after the Charlton game, and I know Sorensen was man of the match that game, but I put Hakeem Adelican as the player of the match for me, because I think we wouldn't have won that game anywhere near as comfortably as we did if it wasn't for him. The little flick-ons that he was doing that were Mandroyu-esque, his ability to hold up the ball while Sorensen or Smith on the other side, or Rowan or whoever was pushing forward. So I just thought his overall ability as a striker in that game specifically, and others, made him pick himself in that striker role again. And then kind of moving back from there, obviously we said Mandroy more or less picks himself. Last Sorensen, I have put as right wing. Now, I was very close to actually having Ali Smith in this team and having Mandroy on the right, or even the left, and having Ali Smith in there as well, because I think that what Ali Smith's done really well is his ability to sort of tuck in and play as sort of more of a central number 10 to then allow an overlapping runner. So, for example, that could suit somebody like a Lass Sorensen really, really well. My only worry is with Smith is he's better at doing that in a game where we are on the front foot constantly. And I feel like sometimes, I don't want to use the word liability, but I feel like sometimes he's not as strong in the squad in a game where we're under pressure. And I feel like I saw that a little bit against Fleetwood in the second half, was probably the biggest one for me, where I just thought he was actually having a little bit of a poor game. I thought his first half, he was absolutely outstanding, and he was good in parts in the second half, but under the cosh, he didn't really look as comfortable as some of the others. So for that reason, I wanted to put Sorensen on the right wing, to kind of have sort of what we did against Charlton anyway, but having a Mandroyu type on the left, who we're hoping is obviously actually going to be Danny Mandroyu for the whole month, being able to kind of tuck inside. Obviously, then it's Sean Rowan bombing forward on the left. Now, Rowan's defensive abilities are probably better than his attacking abilities. I think we can all probably agree that. But I also don't think he's inept at all going forward. So I feel like we can still utilise that, even though I would maybe prefer more of a wing-back type in that position. But I feel like this was the best way to fit Mandroyu tucking in, an overlapping left wing back, which, as I said, in this case is Rowan. But then on the right-hand side, you've got the link up with Sorensen and Burrows, where both can bomb forward and get into positions. You can actually have Sorensen sitting wide and Burrows playing as like an inverted wing back that moves into the midfield at times, or a Burrows who sits wider and Sorensen even moving in it. I just feel like this formation will complement itself best. Mitchell, Jackson, O'Connor, obviously because I've got Rowan out of left wing back, I think that back three picks itself. I want to give a big sort of shout out to Alex Mitchell. I personally would have had him in even if I was having Rowan at left centre half, and I would have dropped Jacko, which I feel really harsh saying because Jackson he's an 8 out of 10 most games, let's be honest. But I think Alex Mitchell's got the ability to be a 9 or 10 out of 10 in a game. I don't quite think Jackson's got that ability, that extra level of ability within him, even though he is a consistently solid centre half. So yeah, there's my team. What are your guys' thoughts?
I'll just chime in. I don't think you lose anything from Hacks by playing him on the right, because I think that we have quite a fluid setup up top. Whereas I think against Charlton, Hacks was often finding himself out wide anyway, and it did really work quite well. My only thoughts on that would be that it's actually a slight imbalance if we're saying, well, on the left we're going to tuck in and on the right we're going to overlap. I think that, in my opinion, because it's only an opinion, nobody's right or wrong, but I think that would make us a little predictable. Whereas I quite like the idea of having a front three where, you know, the two can tuck in or can even swap over potentially, can kind of find those pockets of space. I do like a striker who plays as a striker, so I kind of contradict myself there. But I think the fact that we've all got a Delican in says an awful lot, especially when, you know, it was just before, I think, Fleetwood, me and Chris said on the podcast, I think we've seen the last of Hakeem Delican, and since then we've all picked him in our best 11 over Ed Bishop and over Ali Smith.
Yeah, I think he's very much picked himself in whatever position you want to put him in. Hakeem Delican has done so well this month, and you know, against Carlisle, and then there was the game immediately after Carlisle, which it escapes me now, but he played really, really well. And then he kind of drops off a little bit and had a couple of sort of 6 out of 10 performances where I think we spoke on the podcast, Gary, that he didn't really seem brave enough, didn't really have much confidence. He was just looking for the simple pass, which works when we don't really have any other options, and that's great that he's not trying to do anything silly. But we wanted to see a little bit more from him to be able to see him stick within the team. And I think he showed us that. So he showed us that he's got both sides of the game now, to the point where, yeah, he very much picks himself. Any thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, to be honest, the only point I was going to make was the fluidity of the front three that Gary made. So, yeah, nothing else to add, mate, to be honest, other than I'm going to gang up with Gary on you this time round rather than gang up with you picking on Gaz.
Right, well, thank you for that, Chris. I thought we were friends.
You still pick Jack Boras at right wing back.
Well, yeah, because I like a right-footed right wing back.
He can play either side. He can play either side.
Yeah, exactly. Also, just a little nugget of information, if you like. I mentioned this on the monthly show last time with Chris when we both did our best 11. So I think we only had one difference in our best 11 last time. And at the time, we were the team in League One that had used the least amount of players, with 20. We are now the third least with 22. Any ideas who those two new players were this month?
Shadiko?
Yeah.
Or Jack Vale.
Yeah, there you go. So they're the new two. So we are no longer the team with the least amount of players. But yes, those are the best 11s. And we're going to head on now to look at who our player of the months were. Okay, so for this month's Player of the Month chat, we're actually going to switch it around a little bit. Last time, you only heard from me and Chris about who our Player of the Month was. Obviously, this time, we will also be hearing from Gary. But we're also going to have heard from you guys, the viewers. So, on staceywest.net, you are able to vote at the end of every match on your ratings for those individual players. Now, at the end of the month, Gary collates all them ratings together and finds out who fans vote for as the Player of the Month. Now, Gary, I'll let you talk through who was chosen as this month's.
Yeah, I mean, it's given away. Obviously, it's Alex Mitchell. Millwall Loney was your top player this month. He got 3 man of the matches. and he got them in 3 consecutive games. So he was your man of the match against Peterborough and Burton, which really helped kind of bump his numbers up, because there was some really poor numbers in there. And bear in mind, Sorensen didn't play against Peterborough or Wolves. Ethan Hamilton, Adam Jackson were also up there. They didn't play against Wolves, whereas Alex Mitchell got a 7.5. So he had quite a good grounding. The 3 final matches under Mark Kennedy, he was very, very good. He's also then been solid afterwards. 7.7 against Fleetwood, 8 against Charlton, 7.4 against Exeter, and he was a 6.2 against Oxford, which, to be fair, there was only 3 players, I think, scored above 6. So he gave him an overall rating of 7.13, the only player this month to have an average rating over all of the games of more than 6. And I think probably the only player to start every game. Jack Burrows potentially. But other than that, I don't think anybody else started all 7 games in the month. So yeah, interested. Your player of the month, Alex Mitchell.
Well, there we go. So we have actually all picked a totally different player, to each other, as well as a different player to Alex Mitchell. But it's really interesting that you guys have rated him so highly. So Gary, we'll start off straight away actually with your player of the month.
Yeah, so I've picked Adam Jackson. Now, when we're good, there are a lot of players that stand out, and Adam Jackson doesn't so much, because when you're good, your centre halves perhaps don't. Bear in mind, he didn't play against Wolves, which actually probably brought his average rating down a little bit. But I just really like Jacko this month. I think he was one of the few players who came out of Oxford looking composed. I thought that Pawdy struggled a little bit against Oxford at the back, but I don't think that Jacko ever looked flustered. There was one ball he pinged early in the first half, I think, which was a massive crossfield ball. It was Montsmer-esque. It was quality. I always think he's calm. I think he's assured. He doesn't give away an awful lot of fouls. I really want to point on something that Chris picked up on as well, in that he played 6 of the 7 games in October. He only played 6 league games before Halloween in all of the 2020-21 season. So he's somebody that there was this perception that he can't play Saturday, Tuesday. He can't do it every week. He's a crock. We have to nurse him through. And actually, he's played 13, I think, league games, 14 games in total this season. And he'd only played 8 league games up to the end of October last season. He'd only played 9 league games up to the end of October the season before. So I think that what we're seeing is a fit and a fire in Adam Jackson, and I just think he's Mr. Consistency. You said he's an 8 out of 10 every game. I think he's a 7 out of 10 every game. I think he's basically the Sam Habergam of the centre halves. And I think whilst we've had dips and troughs, we've had Burton, we've had Peterborough, we've had Oxford, which weren't great games. If you watch all of those games back, the one player that you'd say, well, yeah, he did all right, is Adam Jackson. So he's done all right in the games where other people have struggled. He was my man of the match on Tuesday night against Oxford, and he was very marginally close to being, I think actually he was overall man of the match as well. Yeah, he was. So he was overall man of the match from the Stacey West. I like him. I just think he's dependable.
I think that's very fair enough, and it's a consistent. He is a consistent performer in what has been a somewhat inconsistent month. Chris, you've gone for somebody who is a fan's favourite.
Yes, I have, and I'm normally with you guys in regards to consistency is normally the biggest barometer for me in choosing a player of the month. But for me, Lass has not been inconsistent at any point. He's been very reliable. You can never, ever doubt his energy, his enthusiasm, his desire to work hard for the team. He never, ever lets the team down. But I think alongside his relatively consistent performances, of course, he missed the Peterborough game at the start of the month, which probably helped his average ratings, I have to say. But if you have 11 shots in one match against Charlton Athletic with, let's be honest, it's one of the best individual performances I've ever seen from a Lincoln City footballer, that game. And there's a lot of good performances, but Lass was everywhere. He was outstanding, absolutely outstanding. And let's be honest, let's not forget, in an unfamiliar position for him. Up until that point, there wasn't a single player in the whole of the EFL that had 11 shots in a single match. Interestingly, him and another player, I forget who it was now, Mansfield player, Lucas Akins did on the same evening. But yeah, it's just, for me, that was just such a standout performance. You can't really ignore it. Alongside his genuine kind of hot on his sleeve kind of work ethic that you can never ever question, and his general level of consistency with the frankly ridiculous performance against Charlton on top of that is kind of what just elevated him for me. In what was quite a tough decision again, to be honest. But yeah, he came out on top for me for that reason.
Yeah, totally. And I think it is one of the toughest player of the months we've actually had to choose from. For me, I think in the first couple of months, players have somewhat picked themselves. I think we both had Ethan Hamilton last time out. In fact, I think, Gary, you had Ethan Hamilton as well for the end of September.
Yeah, he was the player of the month for Stacey West at the end of September.
So all four would have been Ethan Hamilton in that scenario. However, none of you guys have picked him this month, but I have. Now, for me, the reason I've picked Ethan Hamilton is the exact same sort of reason that Gary has picked Adam Jackson. I just think that he has been the constant rock in the middle of what has actually been quite obviously a turbulent month. No matter what the sort of managerial change there was, no matter what personnel was around him, no matter the fact that obviously Sorensen was moved forward for a couple of games and Rowan left wing back and things that we haven't necessarily seen as much of this season, Ethan Hamilton has always been one of the best players on the pitch in every single match. I think we said at the end of September that for somebody to come in and stand out as much as he does next to Ethan Errahon, after being 6 months behind Ethan Errahon, if you like, in a Lincoln City shirt, he is a top level player. He's making Errahon look average, and that's no insult on the other Ethan at all. But Hamilton is a top level midfielder. We know we've got one of the best midfield partnerships in this league, and I think his ability from box to box is outstanding, and it is constantly at a top level in every single match. So that's why I've picked him as player of the month.
I think you have to add to that, to be honest, to kind of back you up, really, is he had a similarly impressive performance as last did in Fleetwood away. He was brilliant at Fleetwood away. I'd love to see his running stats for that particular game. He was like a man possessed against Fleetwood, wasn't he? So I think what's quite positive is that, you mentioned that on the pitch and results-wise, we've had a bit of a patchy month. We've picked up enough points to keep us massively away from danger, but it's been a bit inconsistent. There have still been some standout performers this month, and as you've just pointed out, we've got 4 different people here, 4 different players, the 3 of us plus the Stacey West viewers. So I think that's a real interesting point, is that we've clearly got quite a high ceiling, I think, in regards to the potential in this squad. It's just finding that level of consistency in the whole squad, and of course just maybe raising the floor in those lower and those poorer performances. But it just fills me full of confidence, just kind of seeing, and then kind of just reminiscing over kind of these, discussing all the kind of benefits of these players. Yeah, all 4 of them that we've mentioned have had really good months, haven't they? And it's hardly a bad thing. It's not like we were scratching our heads trying to find somebody, because they've all been crap. These all had really outstanding months, so that's a real positive.
I also find it interesting that actually those 4 were significantly ahead of everybody else. So Sorensen was 4th out of those with a 6.80. So the next outfield player got 6.45. So there was a 0.4 swing from Pordy O'Connor in 6.45 to Sorensen 6.80. A 0.4 swing downwards encompassed O'Connor, Vale, Burrows, Arahan, Smith, Gallagher, Adelican, McCarma. I mean, okay, one of those only played one game. Hackett, who was obviously injured, and Rowan as well. So actually, they were the 4 standout performers, which I suppose is underlines that my preferred 11 was right.
Swiftly moving on. So yeah, I think you made a really good point there, Chris, about the fact that these 4 players specifically, but also the rest of the squad, it is of a really high level. But what's going to be really interesting moving forward is to see how we're able to utilize these in either our current system or moving over to a new system if/when we get a new manager in. So to do that, why don't we go and have a little look at the tactics screen? Okay, so you can now all see the tactics board on the screen. So we're going to talk through primarily, I think the biggest topic coming out of this month is obviously the managerial change from obviously Mark Kennedy being our permanent manager to having Tom Shaw as interim. So it would only be right to discuss what are the biggest tactical changes. Now, Gary, why don't you start us off with what's your take on tactical changes between Kennedy ball and Shaw ball?
Now, as a disclaimer, I know that there are changes. I know that things have been different, but I don't think there's been sweeping changes overall. Okay. I think the difference largely has been in the opposition. So I think Mark Kennedy perhaps went a little bit introvert towards the end of his spell, and he was concentrating more on not getting beaten. Whereas what Tom Shaw has done is tried to do what we were doing at the beginning of the season with a little bit more attacking play, but he's attempted to do that against the right sort of teams, and he's tried to do it also without the strikers. So in the main, Joe, I think you look at Burton Albion, which was what the last example of Kennedy ball, and it was woeful. But there was 2 banks of 6, and there was a bank of 6 defenders, and then it was a bank of 3, and they had the one guy up front. So it doesn't matter what your number 9 does here. It doesn't matter where he goes around here. There's a bank of 6. It doesn't matter if you push your wingers there. It doesn't matter if you bring them in and you put your wide players down, because there you're committing to attack. There's still a bank of 6. So that was a problem that I think that Kennedy ball faced against Burton Albion. Had we then gone on and played against Charlton Athletic under Mark Kennedy, I'm not saying things would have been exactly the same, but Charlton Athletic came to attack us. Charlton were a great team for us to play, and we kind of perhaps didn't see that as such at the beginning, because we knew that what they did, they were just going to keep doing constantly. We knew that was going to happen. Charlie agrees with me as well in the background, as you can see. Probably the main difference, I think, the other Charlie. I think the other main difference is it's in these 2 players here and here, because I think if anything, Tom Shaw has tucked slightly tighter. He's allowed them to swap over. He's allowed a Hakiba Delican here to come out wide. He's allowed a man draw. So it's that fluidity. I've messed up your graphic now, Charlie. That's probably the major difference. What he's actually done is he's done what Mark Kennedy was trying to do, but he's allowed the players to do it. And that might sound really stupid, but Mark Kennedy went on about being brave on the ball, about playing passes, about doing this, about doing that. But actually, there was a real fear for the players to do that. Mark Kennedy wanted fluid football. He wanted our wingers to come over. He wanted these players to be tucking in. He wanted, these little kind of passages of play between the 2 and the 7 here, with the midfielder coming in and creating the little triangles. That's what he was aiming to do. But he didn't give the players the confidence or the belief to do it. Tom Shaw has done nothing tactically significantly different, but he's given the players the freedom. I don't know. He seems to have not released them. I hate saying that. I hate take the handbrake off. I hate all of that. They're playing the same system, doing the same things, but the players have got more confidence to do it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And before, Chris, you go on to tell us all of the actual tactical changes that have been made, I'm just going to put on record, I very much agree with yourself, Gary. I think for me, the physical changes in terms of on a tactics board when they're sort of making game plans, I don't think there's actually been as much of a change as what maybe you would expect, considering some of the performances we've had recently. But I very much agree. I think it's an attitude thing. I pick out Boston in pre-season friendly. Now, I understand it's playing against National League North opposition, but we're all at Boston and we came away from it buzzing for the season ahead. And we did this monthly show about a week after Boston or something like that. And we were talking about attacking as a unit of 5 and having these amazing little triangles between the right central midfielder, the right wing or right forward and the right wing back, and the same on the left-hand side. And it was really evident against Boston. It was something we're really looking forward to seeing. But I don't really think we were ever actually able to show it to its proper extent in many league matches, to the point where, like I said, we were actually playing probably a little bit too defensive at times and not really showing our attacking capabilities, even though we had the players that were able to execute it. And I would very much agree that a lot of that was probably a belief thing, because as soon as Tom Shaw came in, what we then saw was the players having a much more positive attitude on the ball as well as off it. And we were talking about bravery. Somebody like Akiva Delican against Charlton. Some of the bravery in the passes. There wasn't an issue with passing to a player that was being marked by somebody, even a player that had like 3 men around him, because they knew and they had trust and faith in each other that they would still be able to get that ball back out, either back to them in a little 1-2 or flicking that on to somebody else, or just being able to hold the ball up for somebody else to then move forward. So I probably agree that most of it was actually a sort of an attitude and mental change. I agree. I hate terms like take the handbrake off or release the shackles or anything like that. I can't stand it. But I definitely think there's been a massive attitude shift and some kind of dynamic change there, which has meant that Tom Shaw has been able to get the best out of this set of players. But Chris, why don't you tell us why we're wrong and why the game plans have actually changed?
I'm not going to say you're wrong.
Good.
I'm going to maybe give a little bit of maybe depth to it. To be honest, what the numbers suggest, maybe disagree with what all three of us maybe perceive, because I also agree the biggest change has been Tom Shaw's man management, really, and providing the platform for the players to play in the way that he wants to. He's kind of taken responsibility for any misplaced passes and mistakes before they've even happened. In his pre-match press conference, he's been kind of saying to the players, I want them to be brave, I want them to play through the thirds, I want them to control the game with the ball. If it goes wrong, that's on me. He's taking the pressure off them. And I think that absolutely has a massive impact. So I think the difference really is we're maybe now doing more of what Mark Kennedy wanted us to do, but less of what we were actually doing under Mark Kennedy. I think we became more and more risk averse under Kennedy, which then made it less possible for us to play in the way that we wanted to. So you made a really good point about the kind of those wide triangles, so the right centre back, right centre mid, and right wide player, and vice versa. But if we are being massively risk averse, so if I'm right, just to grab these. So if we of course, we mentioned we want to kind of get into these sort of positions here, where these three players are combining with themselves. Obviously, Sarah on the other side. All great, all makes perfect sense. But wing backs is a fantastic system to play when you have the ball. It's very, very difficult from an attacking perspective. When you haven't got the ball, it's very difficult. Because if you're just lumping the ball forward because you've been massively risk averse from the back three and you're playing it long, all you're asking is for your wing backs to run up and down the pitch, chasing the ball and never really seeing it. Mm-hmm. They're never really in that position in the high up part of the pitch, in those advanced areas, to actually receive the ball. They're just chasing it. You have to try and play a bit more football from deep areas to really get the most out of the wing backs. And I think the biggest change we've seen in possession under Tom Shaw is he's asked our defenders to try and play a bit, and tried to quite simply just said, we've already got the structure there. Just trust yourselves and trust your teammates, really, to kind of play in those pockets. That, in addition to, you're right, one of those 10s. So when Harry Smith was playing in the 10 role, a lot of the times he found himself not even tucking in, actually completely central. So this, you mentioned that in regard to a bit of a change shape-wise, but the biggest thing for me really has been the number of passes that we've played in some games, and just really the style. The numbers actually maybe kind of disagree with that to an extent, but I think maybe the numbers even out a tad because we haven't been able to do what Tom Shaw wants us to do for a full 90 minutes. We've almost regressed back to what we were doing under Kennedy towards the end of his reign in a lot of those games, but we have definitely seen flashes of differences, and of course the pinnacle of that being the Charlton game. But just to kind of give you an idea, so what I haven't done is compared one month to the other month. I've compared Tom Shaw's 4 games to Mark Kennedy's last 4 games. So, of course, really small sample sizes. So you don't read everything into these, but it gives us a bit of an idea. So, of course, in those last 4 games, we've got 3 points under Mark Kennedy. In Tom Shaw's 4 games, we've got 7. So in regard to pure points tally, obviously that's better. We know that. There's no denying that. But at the same time, that's kind of a little bit of a kind of hypocritical of what I was saying this time last month about we got good results at the start of the season under Mark Kennedy, but it wasn't sustainable. So I think we can discount the points haul. Let's actually look at the underlying numbers. So our goals, we scored 3 goals in those 4 games under Mark Kennedy. We've scored 5 under Tom Shaw. We conceded 5 under Mark Kennedy. We've conceded 4. So we've gone from a -2 to a +1. But again, underlying numbers actually suggest that maybe that's not what should have happened. So under Mark Kennedy, our XG4 in those 4 games is 1.15 on average. So we actually underachieved our XG. Under Tom Shaw, it has gone up, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. It has gone up to just under 1.5. So that's quite a big shift, to be honest. Biggest change, though, has been our XG against. Now, we've criticised Mark Kennedy quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, to be honest. One thing that we can't criticise was our defensive shape and how, regardless of those individual errors, as a unit, how hard to break down we have been. And the average XG against in those last 4 games under Mark Kennedy, bear in mind, only one win out of those 4 games was 0.72. And in Tom Shaw's games, it's doubled almost to 1.41. So our XG4 and XG against under Tom Shaw are actually quite similar, but they're both almost 1.5. And that's quite a big jump up. Again, that's probably not a surprise to anybody, but I think what's happened here is we have actually been a little bit more open. And I would be a little bit concerned. Well, not concerned, because it just shows you can't have everything all the time, can you? You can't be super solid at the back and also be brilliant going forward. You have to take more risks to create more chances. And that ultimately is going to leave you more open at times. And I think for the new manager, whoever it is that comes in, the challenge is going to be trying to find the best of both worlds and finding that nice balance. But our shots have massively increased. We're having an extra 3 shots per game and an extra 3 shots on target per game as well compared to under Kennedy. So we're clearly creating better chances as well as a higher quantity. But also the shots faced has increased from 9 to 14. And our shots on target faced has increased from 3 to 6. So it's just interesting, isn't it? That we've got the results. It's more exciting. More is happening in the game. They're more memorable games because there's action at both ends, and we've obviously got on the right side of some results. But actually, we are not quite as defensively solid as a unit as we were under Mark Kennedy. So I think sometimes you've got to be really objective, and we all know what we want, we all know what we like. We've all really enjoyed these games, but actually, as much as we have been a marginally bigger threat going forward, we've also been more open at the back, and we've been less solid than we were under Kennedy. So, really interesting moving forward. I think to see who comes in next. Just how will they set us up to try and to ultimately maximise both ends of the pitch as well as you can with the squad that we have.
So all I would say about that, I think, is you have to also bear in mind the level of opposition. So, for instance, we're talking about lack of XG faced in Mark Kennedy's last games. One of those games was against shot-shy Cheltenham, and the other was against the Burton side that came for a 0-0, and we only scored their goal. So you've got 2 games there where we had an opposition that weren't really troubling us or having a go at us. Okay, we played Portsmouth and we played Peterborough, who are 2 teams that certainly did. But when you look at the 4 games from Tom Shaw, you've got Fleetwood, who had to have a go because they were the home team. Charlton, who don't know anything other than to try and attack. They only have the one plan. Exeter, who were the home team, so had to give it a go. Plus, bear in mind, that was Saturday, Tuesday. So I think tired legs, long trip down there. And then an Oxford team that are attacking as well. I don't disagree with the numbers, but I just think, look, I love a stat, but also, I think if we dig down a little bit, it's quite hard. We can't get a fair cross-section from Tom Shaw because we've only seen 4 games. And I do wonder if Tom Shaw had faced, or Tom Shaw's team had faced, Cheltenham and Burton Albion rather than, let's say, Exeter or Fleetwood, if the numbers would look significantly different.
Yeah, I think they're really good points. And they're really small sample sizes. I think the point I wanted to make was it would be easy to get carried away because of the points haul in Tom Shaw's 4 league games compared to Mark Kennedy's last 4 league games. 7 points compared to 4 points. If they're extrapolated over a season, we'd get relegated with that continue with Mark Kennedy. We'd finish in the playoffs under Tom Shaw. And it's easy to look at it in those 4 game kind of blocks and go, oh, well, look how much better we are. But actually underlying those results, the numbers aren't significantly backing up those results. We have improved going forward. There's absolutely no denying that. And I think we've all seen it as well. We can see what we're trying to do. It maybe felt a little bit like Mark Kennedy run out of ideas, to be honest, for me, certainly from an attacking sense. So, yeah, I'm with you, mate. I love a stat. I love the numbers. I like them to kind of help form an opinion, but it's a small sample size. It doesn't tell the whole story, but also the results don't tell the whole story either. And I think it's just important not to get carried away with the results, despite, of course, the results been really positive. And again, we've mentioned both statistically and result-wise, performance-wise, that Charlton game was a real standout. And, we're going to remember that for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. And there's no denying that at the end of August, we were sat here talking about how amazing results had been as well. And sort of I asked you, Chris, the question whilst we're recording this of, is it sustainable? And obviously we spoke about certain things at the time. Obviously then it wasn't. And some results started to drop off a little bit, and you start losing a little bit of clinicality when obviously we lost our strikers and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's a process that there's no denying that Tom Shaw has done well so far. It's about seeing how long it can keep going, and can we keep a Tom Shaw side winning and earning a lot of points until we bring somebody else in, or whether that ends up being Tom Shaw as a permanent, which is of course an option on the cards as well. But talking about looking ahead, we have now wrapped up the review part of the show, and the final segment is now to look at the fixtures. Okay, so on the screen now are the fixtures for the month of November. Again, we have 7 matches, 2 cup games to start off the month as well, with Morecambe at home on Saturday and Notts County at home on Tuesday night. So, first of all, we'll kind of ignore the cup games for a minute. We will have 5 league matches. I think the start off sort of question is, what do we expect to see from those 5? What's the minimum that we'd be happy with? And then what's the top level of our kind of hope? Gary?
Well, the top level's 15 points, Charlie.
Well,
just to get that on. I think if we take 8 points from that, I think that would be the minimum. You without being disrespectful to teams, you want to be beating Port Vale at home 3.
Yeah.
I can see us taking draws from Stevenage and Leyton Orient, tough games on the road. Cambridge away, probably a game looking at the league table that you think, well, could fancy that. So there's your 8 points, and that leaves Barnsley at home. You shouldn't be losing your home game, so that would be a 9. Inevitably, we're going to lose 1 or 2 of those games. My prediction, probably Stevenage. He's one that we're likely to lose. They're going to be tough on compromising. One of the few home teams that won't be coming out to particularly attack us. Leyton Orient, that's going to be a night full of emotion. I think it's going to be a really challenging night for us, because I think we're seen a little bit as villains now for the game being replayed, which is harsh, because it's not our decision. It's not something we pushed for. So those 2 games, if we were to take a point, let's say maybe from those 2 games, you would realistically say 2, 3 from Port Vale, 3 from Cambridge, and then you want to be picking up 1 from Barnsley. That's what I expect. He's probably 8 points from those.
Yeah,
I was going to say exactly the same.
Agree. Yeah.
Next.
Considering some of the sort of differences that we've had of opinion so far in this monthly show, it's quite nice to agree on that. I think Port Vale at home it's a game where we're going to be their expected favourites, and it's a game where you'd like to see us perform. Stevenage away is going to be a really tough one. I'm not looking forward to that game. I think that's going to be really, really difficult for us. Leyton Orient, it's going to have a whole other story around it. We know that football is going to be second on that night, and it will. So it's going to be sort of interesting to see how the players are able to cope with that for the 90 minutes. Barnsley at home, I would very much agree. I think we'd like to be able to get a point. We know it's going to be a tough match. Cambridge away, I mean, with last season, we won't mention Cambridge away last season, but the season before we ended up beating them, 5-1 away from home.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to win 5-1. Was it 5-1 or 5-0, actually?
5-1.
It was 5-1. I was right.
Yeah, they did score.
So it'd be nice to get 5-1 again with a Hakeem Adelakan goal.
Do you know what? I'm going to go back a little bit on what I've said, because just as you've been talking, I've been looking at those home fixtures, and actually Port Vale's the one we don't win, and Barnsley's the one we do win. Because Barnsley is the Charlton, Barnsley's the Derby. They're the team that are going to come at us and leave things open, as long as we don't do what we did against Oxford. Whereas Port Vale are just going to come and try not to get beaten, aren't they? The one thing Port Vale do have, of course, is a League Cup distraction. So, but anyway, sorry to cut off.
There's a big old caveat into all this, though, isn't there? Is that at some point in the next month we fully expect a head coach to come in, which can change perceptions. it also makes us far more difficult to scout in upcoming games because all those teams that will have an idea of how we play, because it was pretty obvious that Oxford knew exactly how we were going to play. They set up brilliantly to counter us. Get a new gaffer in. A lot of that scouting from an opposition perspective kind of goes out the window a little bit. So yeah, we can predict this. I think I'll be really satisfied with 8 points over this next 5 league games. 5 league games. Sorry.
5, yeah.
That kind of keeps us in and around it. Keeps us probably just mid-table. And we mentioned it before. You know, we could potentially be one of those teams that has a really strong second half of the season. All we need to do is just make sure that we stay within touching distance and we don't get dragged into anything kind of looking over our shoulder. And I think Tom Shaw's done an admirable job to kind of drag us away from just starting to think about that and got us looking up the table again. But yeah, of course, as soon as a new manager comes in, let's be honest, each individual game will feel winnable just because it's new and it's fresh and you get that, hopefully you get that little bit of a bounce, don't you? So yeah, even those ones that we might find more challenging. So Stevenage away, for example, Barnsley, we probably might be going into those thinking, you know, here we go, got a right chance here. So, but there's also 2 cup games. There's also 2 cup games. I love the FA Cup. I'm really looking forward to Saturday. Not so bothered about Tuesday, I'll be honest, but really, really looking forward to Saturday. I love the FA Cup. So yeah, can't wait for that one.
I'm going to slightly disagree. So first of all, really looking forward to Saturday. Again, FA Cup. We just want to be able to get a win, to be able to get, realistically, as a League 1 or 2 club, your aim is always just to get to the 3rd round. That's kind of the bare minimum of what you want, because then you're in with the big boys and you've got a chance of getting a really good cup tie away from home or at home. And obviously we've already had a couple of them already this season. But I'm actually really looking forward to Tuesday night as well in terms of the whole sort of aspect of the season, because if we can win on Tuesday night, a draw potentially as well, I believe, on goal difference. But definitely if we can win on Tuesday night, it means that we can progress in the EFL Trophy. We'll obviously get the money that comes with that, get into the knockout stages. If you end up getting an under-21 side in the knockout stages, you're more likely to sort of progress. And I just feel like we've got a good chance of going far in that kind of a competition this year. And I feel like it's one that we're going to take really seriously. So I'm sort of really hopeful of a win on that one. There's another sort of couple of little caveats in terms of there is a chance that we have obviously got Morecambe away from home on the Tuesday night after Port Vale. We very much hope that won't be the case, but if we do have to go to a replay, that will be in between Port Vale at home and Stevenage away. And finally, there is an international break this month. I don't expect our game to get called off. It is for Stevenage away. And I would assume would also actually cover Leyton Orient away. So I find it very unlikely that we would have it called off. And I assume Leyton Orient don't expect to either, considering they've agreed for the rearrangement to happen on that Tuesday night. So there is obviously the tiniest chance that Stevenage game gets called off, although I don't see it. So yeah, ultimately, I'm looking forward to the month ahead. Obviously, as you've said, Chris, who knows when the new manager comes in, and that could really shift what our perceptions are of this month.
Yeah, can I just add something on the Notts County game? Because I get your point, completely get your point. There are some benefits to that, of course there are, and I'm normally actually quite a big advocate of the EFL Trophy. I think it can be a really useful cup for us to kind of go after. I just think, you know, we're going to have to play a strong squad against Morecambe. I think we will rotate a little bit, but we're going to have to play a strong squad because we want to win the game. We need to win that game, really. You know, the club takes all cups really seriously, which makes me think that, of course, we're going to take the Notts County game maybe a bit more seriously than maybe I'd like us to. But I think Tuesday really convinced me that the lads have just played a lot of football recently and they need a rest. So I've really hope, actually, not necessarily fully expect, actually, but really hope that we play a heavily rotated team against Notts County. And we, you know, if we can get something out of that, great. Like you said, we can move into the next round. We can get the cash in the bank. But for me, the league has to be the priority this season. And also, if we do win against Morecambe, we'll get a decent amount of prize money for that. That puts us into the hat for the next round. So for me, if we do get a positive result against Morecambe, I would quite like us to heavily rotate the team against Notts County. And then hopefully then we can really embrace those next kind of 4 or 5 league games with a refreshed squad. So that's kind of why I said I wasn't that particularly bothered about the Notts County game. It's because I kind of hope we're not, to an extent.
I'll drop in on Notts County as well. I echo Chris's comments entirely. For me, we've given ourselves a chance of qualifying by beating Wolves. Notts County are not going to go hell for leather. They've played a weakened side. You talk about qualifying now. Just to clarify, it's really confusing. So if Derby beat Wolves under 21s, we can beat or draw with Notts County. We can draw with Notts County and lose on penalties. We would still qualify. If Derby draw with Wolves under 21s but win on penalties, we must draw or beat Notts County, and the outcome of penalties still wouldn't matter. If Derby draw with Wolves and lose on penalties, we must then beat Notts County or draw and win on penalties. If Wolves then beat Derby, it starts getting really complicated. So just for instance, I've written this down, if Wolves beat Derby by a single goal, assuming the rules are the same as last season, which they are, it's goal difference, it separates the sides first. So if Wolves beat Derby by a single goal, their goal difference would be 0. So we'd progress with a win against Notts County. But a draw with either penalty outcome wouldn't suffice, so we'd have to win. Here's the fascinating thing. If Wolves beat Derby by 3 goals, it gives Derby a 0 goal difference. So we'd be back to qualifying just if we beat Notts County. But we think we would qualify above Derby. I mean, it's honestly, you know what?
That's so silly.
You know what? I disagree. I absolutely love this format because it's so confusing and so utterly bonkers. I mean, you can draw and there's a penalty shootout. And do you know what? I want to see us play against Notts County. I think Jay Ben's still injured, but I'd be bringing back the Charlie Kendalls. I'd be bringing back whoever we could bring back to fill that squad out. I'd be playing Shadipo, or Jaden Brown, or play Jordan Wright, or you'd be playing TJ Aoma. Everybody. It goes to show the previous Wolves game. Alex Mitchell played, yes, but Lass Sorensen didn't play. I think Paudie O'Connor came on. Adam Jackson didn't play. Ethan Hamilton didn't play. You've got to rest. Especially if we get if we draw against Morecambe on Saturday. And a lot of people will be watching this actually after the Morecambe game, so it's pointless us discussing that in any depth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Notts County as well, our system is. I feel like our system is going to be better suited to playing against them actually at home than it is to some other teams, because Notts County aren't necessarily a team that go and just sit back. We played them away from home already this season and they didn't score. No, but they had the ball for most of the game. They were playing it around the back. They tried to move it forward at times, but didn't really do it with much efficiency. They were just ultimately a really, really poor side. Now, Notts County are, they're in the automatic promotion places in League Two for a reason, but they're really defensively sort of poor. They're very susceptible to conceding and to losing games, actually. You
horrible man.
I had to get it in there. No, so I feel like even with a heavily rotated side, this kind of side that we saw against Wolves, even as much as the side that we saw against Derby, sort of Oshie and Gallagher in the middle, that those sorts of changes, and obviously we know somebody like TJ will end up starting as well as Jaden Brown. I feel like we'll still be strong enough to probably get the result against them, to the point where I very much agree we should heavily rotate, and I think we will, but I don't think it'll be to our detriment too much. So yeah, those are the fixtures. We shall remove that. So that was the October monthly show. I'm going to get it right, even though we are recording this in November, but people don't need to know that. So yes, that was the October monthly show. Thank you so much for joining me, Gary.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for having me, Charlie. It was a pleasure to be on the show. And
thank you very much, Mr. We'll just call him Mr. Tactics, Chris Lamming. We won't call him a genius because he gets upset.
That's better. Well, I mean, if it was true, it'd be great, but I know it's not.
So, Mr. Tactics.
Yeah, I'll take that all day long. Thank you.
Sounds like a Spider-Man baddie.
That's fine by me. Oh, the shirt goes with it, actually. Isn't it? Anyway.
Oh, yes. He's dressed up for a reason.
But yes, it's been a. This is my regular attire. Just I didn't put anything on special for you, mate. Sorry. But it's been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll see everyone again this time next month, hopefully, with a new head coach and some exciting news.
We certainly will. Be sure to keep an eye out on the YouTube channel for new content. Obviously, previews basically twice a week at the minute, and there are a couple of things in the pipeline for if/when we get a new manager as well. So make sure to keep on checking out all of the content that goes across the whole of the Stacey West network. Enjoy your month. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.